I think a weird peeping Tom tried to break into my apartment. So this happened April 2024, and I didn't think my trauma that I'm still trying to heal from was that serious, until I shared my experience with others, and saw how horrified they were from the story, so thought this would be a great place to share my unfortunate story. Also, wanted to get this off my chest, because like I said, this has traumatized me, and I still feel very uncomfortable living alone. I'm gonna try to explain how the apartments were set up for context, because I'm not sure I'm allowed to post the doorbell footage on here. If I find out I can, I will definitely update, so bear with me. The way the complex is set up is there are several buildings on the property. One will hold multiple apartments and be 2 stories high. The way the buildings are positioned, 2 will be facing each other, so everyone's front door was directly across from someone else's, with like a median in the middle, so we were separated by maybe 5 yards, more or less. For example, my apartment was upstairs, and was directly facing another building, so the front doors of mine and the tenant on the 2nd floor across from me in the other building are facing each other. Sorry in advance, I hope that made sense. Also important to note, my apartment is directly in front of the stairs that everyone uses to reach the 2nd floor apartments. Same with the tenant directly across from me. I, 20F at the time, lived alone in a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment for a year and a half. During that time, I almost always left the large window in my living room open, about like an inch, then the rest would be closed, blinds included. This was because I had low quality evaporative cooling, aka a swamp cooler. If you know, you know. And I live in a dry part of Texas that gets very hot. Also, I have a cat who likes to look out the window in his small cat tree. One night, my boyfriend, we'll call him Tristan, came over and we were smoking some pot, which we did regularly, while watching a murder mystery documentary on YouTube. It's important to mention for later that the window in my bedroom was open a bit, but the blinds were down, and blocked anyone from looking into my room. Everything was fine until my cat started making a growling noise, and began pacing in and out of my room and the living room with a poofy tail. I had just gotten my cat a little over a month prior, so it was weird to me and worried me, because I'd never seen him do that before, but also I tried to brush it off because, as Tristan pointed out, I was still learning my orange cat's behaviors and habits. After maybe like 30 minutes passing and my cat still acting weird but calming down a bit, I decided to get up and grab something to drink from the fridge. My fridge was directly in front of the big living room window, a couple feet away. I remember being super paranoid, but chalking it up to my cat still growling and me being a little high. But as I opened the fridge, my anxiety told me, imagine how creepy it would be if you just looked over and saw a face in the window. To make myself feel better, I looked over, and there it was, a man's face clearly staring at me. He looked to be positioned on the stairs perfectly, to have his sight just in line with the gap I left in my window, to have a perfect view of my apartment. Freaked out, I immediately shut the fridge and ran to get Tristan. I did keep an eye on the man for those 3 seconds that it took me to move to my room to get Tristan, and noticed that the man outside saw me, and was starting to move down the stairs, probably to run away. Tristan immediately went to the living room and pushed up the blinds all the way, only to see the man back upstairs, but of course, go back down again and run away. Tristan also went outside to check and make sure that the man actually left, and once he made sure he couldn't see the man anymore, came back in to comfort me. He also closed the window and blinds in the living room completely, while I absolutely lost my mind panicking. He tried to comfort me best he could, but I had to change the documentary, that wasn't in the least bit scary, to something funny and lighthearted, while bawling my eyes out. Then I started hearing noises coming from my bedroom window, so Tristan closed that one too. He also looked outside through the blinds of the window, but said he couldn't see anything. But I was still convinced I could hear something, until after a couple of minutes, when the sound stopped. I let my sister know what happened, and she told me to call the police, but I regret to inform that I didn't. The next day, I worked in the morning and got home around 4 to 5 p.m. and was by myself. My cat was all cooped up with no looking outside time, and I felt bad, so I decided I'd open the windows just until the sun started to set. Then I'd shut everything again, no matter how hot it got. When I went to open my bedroom window, I almost threw up from the amount of pure anxiety that hit me at once. The screen from the window was gone. Someone had removed the screen. I went outside to look for it, hoping to sweet baby Jesus it somehow flew off and was on the floor somewhere outside, since it had been a bit windy the past couple of days. But nope, couldn't find it, along with my sanity. I specifically remember it being there the night before, because I was the one that originally opened both windows. I also always inspect my bedroom screen for bugs, because sometimes they end up on the inside, and well, I wanted to make sure no bugs get into my apartment. So I called my boyfriend and then my sister. They both told me to call the police, and good news, I did call them that time. Tristan immediately came over and did go to the apartment directly across from mine, because we saw they had a Ring camera, and hoped it caught him stealing the screen. We had hoped that if he was caught stealing it, that it would guarantee an arrest if he was found. The good news was the neighbor did catch the creepy man on camera. The bad news was, he wasn't on camera stealing the screen off my window, but instead, it showed footage of him from the night before, trying to look into my window from in front of the neighbor's door. Based on the time of the doorbell's recording, he must have tried looking in from the other building's stairs/balcony. Then, when he couldn't get a good enough look, moved to my building and used my building's stairs to get a better position to look in from. When the police got there, I explained everything and showed them the doorbell footage. They said there wasn't much they could do, but pretty much document what happened. They recommended I get a doorbell that records as well, and gave me documentation on papers as proof I contacted them, so I could show the apartment managers to get my window screen replaced. The best part about talking to the two apartment managers was the lady who rented me the apartment acted completely surprised. She lived at the apartments and claimed she'd never heard of anything like that happening before, which I thought was strange, because the neighbor who sent me the doorbell footage literally said they had issues with the man being a peeping Tom before, and moved apartments because of it. They even knew other tenants on the property who had seen him before trying to look into people's apartments. Right after she acted surprised, the second manager told me how she knew exactly what I was talking about, and even tried reminding the first one, saying, "Remember when Angie came and complained about him that one time?" Safe to say, that entire interaction was very awkward after that. I did get my window screen replaced for free though. To conclude, my screen never got stolen again. I put locks on my windows. I no longer live there, and I no longer live alone. My cat never made that growling sound ever again, and I never saw that man again. Mr. Creepy Man Peeping Tom, let's never meet. Let's never meet again. I, 29M, recently met up with a guy from a dating app. Disclaimer before I continue. I made a lot of dumb decisions and didn't trust my gut. I've been out of a committed relationship for about 6 years, and out of the dating scene entirely for about 15. I got caught up in feeling like someone was interested in me and let it put my best judgment behind me. On to the story. We met up to smoke and play video games. The first red flag went up when we were talking on the phone, and he said something along the lines of, "Don't worry, I'm not going to kill you." I laughed it off as someone being aware of the environment around gay hookups, and the risk you're taking by meeting up with strangers and awkwardly trying to ease the tension. Well, the next red flag came up when I arrived and noticed he seemed out of it. When I sat down, I saw 4 of those 99-cent vodka shots. He had 2 more unopened that he downed shortly after I got there. We hung out for a while, and he seemed like an okay guy, but he repeated and contradicted himself a lot. He tried to make some moves, but halfway through, he just stopped. He made more comments about, "I didn't bring you here to kill you," and "I'm not going to kill you." I was still caught up in the moment and pretty stoned, so I brushed it off as more awkwardness. Sometime later, he asked me to give him a massage. He told me he had back problems, so I was careful, and eventually, he told me I was doing it wrong. He said we should switch, and he'd show me how to do it. We switched, and this is when I realized I needed to leave. He began massaging, but he was pressing down very, very hard and started hurting me. I told him this, and he said something about, "When it hurts is when you know it's working." I asked him to stop and just lay on top of me. Then out of the blue, he asked, "Why don't you care about yourself? I've got really bad dental issues. I've never touched hard drugs, but you'd say I've got meth mouth if you didn't know me. I'm working on it now, after meeting a very kind dentist, but it's taken me a really long time to do so because I've been turned away from doctors and hospitals when they see my teeth and write me off as an addict. So that's where I assumed that question came from. But then it really took a dark turn as he began talking about his sister. He said she was killed by her boyfriend after he invited her to his place for the first time. I didn't say much because I didn't know how to process what I was hearing. Then he said, "Sometimes I think about doing it because I want to understand what was going on in his head when it happened." This sent chills down my spine. I've never felt fear like this before. He was sitting up, weight on my lower back at this point, and in my mind's eye, I kept getting flashes of him holding a weapon above my back. I flipped myself over and shimmied my way out from under him while telling him I needed to leave. I don't know if he had any plans or ideas. Losing a sibling is really tough, so maybe that was at the front of his mind. But I couldn't deny the alarms going off in my nervous system. I've never felt fear take over my body like that before. After some messages today with really weird energy, I told him I wasn't comfortable continuing this and to please not contact me again, then blocked his number and socials. So to you, Mr. I'm not going to kill you, let's please never meet again. Date with a sociopath. Hola. First, I want to apologize. I'm from Germany, and English isn't my first language, so I had this translated with ChatGPT. For obvious reasons, I'll keep some details vague for privacy. Here's the story. When I was 15, I was hanging out in a friend's basement with a former friend, two girls who had escaped a psychiatric facility. Yes, really, and were on drugs, meth and weed. That's where I first met S. I found her really attractive and mysterious. I liked her a lot, but what I didn't know at the time was that she was into me too. I was into her, but she was different. Hard to explain. The kind of person who gives you signals nobody else seems to understand. Anyways, time skip. Years later, I was at a rave. A tunnel rave in my city, straight techno. By coincidence, I ran into her again, and she was on ecstasy. I was honestly shocked to see her there. We started talking and she told me she had been into me back then and still had interest. I still thought she was attractive, and she looked just as intense as I remembered. So we spent time together that night. I made sure she was okay, got her water, etc. Nothing weird at first, just looking out for her. Later, we went to a nearby club after the rave. Once inside the club, things escalated the way you'd expect at that kind of night. Dancing, kissing, drinking, etc. Oh, and there was this guy with her, a friend of hers, who honestly behaved in a very intrusive and uncomfortable way, constantly inserting himself into situations where he clearly wasn't wanted. It completely ruined the vibe. After a while, I left. Before leaving, I took her shirt with me, not for anything malicious, but as an excuse to see her again. And a couple of days later, she came to pick it up. And that's when things got weird. The atmosphere was off immediately. She was extremely cold, distant, almost emotionally flat. The conversation felt forced, like I had to carry every sentence. By the way, she had been to prison prior to all of this. At some point, she started telling me a story. I'll paraphrase it as best as I can, but the tone was the same. She described how a former best friend had hurt her deeply. In response, she allegedly organized a house party to lure that person to her place. At the party, she got that person into a separate room under a false pretense, restrained them, and then harmed them with a razor blade. I honestly didn't know how to react. I tried to stay calm and just responded vaguely. The whole situation felt extremely disturbing, but I ignored my gut feeling because I had known her since I was a teenager, and wanted to believe it was just talk. Eventually, we ended up sleeping together, but the entire experience felt wrong and detached. She left at around 3 a.m., which honestly felt like a relief. After that night, we didn't really talk anymore. And then, things escalated again. About 1 or 2 months after that, I had been awake for 2 days, I guess. While I was out getting groceries late in the evening, I suddenly received Snapchats from her. The first one showed my front door. No context, just my front door. I opened it in the store and immediately felt a wave of panic. I was already sleep deprived and anxious, and this made everything worse. And then more snaps came. A photo of a balcony. It was the balcony directly above my apartment. Again, no text, no explanation. At that point, I felt extremely uneasy and stopped engaging completely. I told my friends about it back then because I genuinely didn't know what to think. Fast forward to 2 years later. A friend told me that she apparently knew I had been talking about the situation. I don't know how accurate that was, but it made me uncomfortable. Then, by pure coincidence, I ended up at a bar/club with some friends. Someone told me she was there too, and suddenly, she appeared next to me. She immediately confronted me, clearly angry, and asking why I had been talking about her. I honestly don't remember much after that night. I had been drinking and the situation became a blur. I just remember wanting to distance myself from her. We all make mistakes, but some people are mistakes. So let's not meet again. Met an old girlfriend and accidentally ended up in a drug den with a Nazi. So I, M24, randomly ran into an old friend, let's call her Lisa, F24, at our town's festival. We hadn't seen each other for almost 2 years, because of education and stuff like that, but we immediately talked and had fun like it was yesterday. She was in town because she was going to meet some friends, and I casually tagged along and had a good time. Lisa had always been a wild kind of girl. She was very popular and good looking, but she was a former punk, who had a history of doing drugs and other stuff like that. While I haven't even touched a drink in my life. But it never bothered me, because we both came from a school environment where drugs were very common, which is one of the reasons I'm capable of keeping calm in very effed up situations. Well, the night continued, and besides finding out Lisa's ex from 2 years ago, who's a drug dealer, had been arrested for possession of 3 kilograms of cocaine he smuggled into a festival, nothing really alarming happened. So we decided to go to one of her friend's apartments, and man, red flags just started to pour down. First, the apartment was completely covered in Barbie decoration. I had never seen so much pink in my life, not even in the Barbie movie. That in itself was not a red flag, but the big bags of coke and other drugs in the stylish Barbie plate was. Turns out, her 3 friends were also drug dealers, and there were just drugs everywhere. But it honestly didn't bother me. Lisa was a sweet girl, I knew her, and I had been out for absolutely insane stuff throughout my entire life, so I had grown kind of numb to it. I had just sat down to have a good time without judging, and we talked, and eventually, me and Lisa ended up talking about exams, specifically about war. I started talking about this movie we had seen about some of the worst things Hitler had done, the worst mistake of the entire night. This grabbed the attention of the people in the room. This gigantic beast of a man, let's call him Kevin, probably around 29 years old. He looked me dead in the eyes and asked, "Do you think Hitler was a bad man?" And I answered, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "But you know he was right, right?" And then he takes me to the side and starts to give me a manifesto about who controls the world, how much he hates Jewish people, and so much bullshit. I'm just going stone-faced and nod throughout it all, while I can clearly see Lisa being uncomfortable and awkward about it happening. Eventually, Kevin stops and claps me on the shoulder, and then hands me his joint. I refuse, saying I had never done drugs or alcohol before, nor did I intend to start. Mistake number 2. He starts laughing and calls me the perfect man, and starts to point out my skin and blonde hair. "You're an absolute perfect specimen. The perfect man, but say, do you have a girlfriend?" "No," I answered. "Then let me guess, you're also a virgin, right?" I just nodded, not wanting to go in too deep. And then he started a second speech that's basically another manifesto, imagining the following part in the voice of Trump. Yes, he talked like that. "You're the perfect man, and I respect you. I respect that you don't do drugs, but I need to warn you, girls will never fall for you. Do you think a writer can write about drugs or go to prison if they have never experienced it? No, they can't. And that's the same for girls. You can never get a girl unless you're willing to experience with them. It's like sex. I was not good at the beginning, but I kept experiencing and trying the pleasure, because you need the experience. Doesn't matter how they look. They can be fat, ugly, and have a bad personality. Doesn't matter. because you just need to fuck to get experience. But unless you let yourself try some coke or marijuana, you will never experience. That's pretty much what I remember from that manifesto. Eventually he stopped, and both me and Lisa thought it was time to go home. Kevin then gave me a big hug and repeated some of the things he said before we left. Keep in touch, man. Keep in touch. On the way home, me and Lisa kind of had a laugh about the whole situation, and she even apologized for what had happened. I told her I didn't mind, and we had had wilder and crazier nights before. We then broke off at her place and promised to see each other more. As I said, Lisa was a wild girl, but she really ended up in the wrong crowd, and both me and a lot of our common friends have tried to get her out of it since. But I definitely hope to never meet Kevin again. I had a stalker and couldn't tell anyone. I sold drugs when I was younger. That harmed my community. It harmed a lot of people. Not just people I sold to, it also affected their families. I do not make excuses. I can't undo my actions from the past. All I can do now is take ownership of my mistakes and try to help others. Especially as a girl, I knew that selling drugs would be a risky business. I thought I could avoid these risks by being selective and careful. I only sold to people I already knew and trusted. It wasn't that simple though. Customers told other people, and other people contacted me. It was hard to say no to the money, and that's how I met Jerry. Jerry had a crush on me. It was obvious, but it felt harmless in the beginning. I think the first red flag was when he started paying me tips. He would pay me for his orders, and then he'd pay me a tip on top of that. One day he asked me my shoe size, and I told him clearly, please do not buy me any shoes. But he still showed up with a pair of rhinestone heels the next time he was picking up an order. He said he had already bought them, and they didn't accept returns. I was pressured, and just accepted them. I was a lot more naive then, but I still understood that situation was going to create problems. He was going to expect something in return. It also worried me that he had always had power to report me to the police. I used to put my phone on silent every night before going to sleep. I still do actually. One morning, I woke up and saw at least 20 missed calls and more than 50 unread messages. They were all from Jerry. He was mad because he found out I had gone to Disneyland with a boy. His messages said things like, "You are so ungrateful. After everything I did for you, you're nothing but a two-faced bitch. You're dead to me. Do not ever contact me again." I wish I could say I wasn't bothered by any of that, but I was. I was afraid of being on his bad side because he could report me. His words were also hurtful, and I felt that. I was also concerned how he knew about me going to Disneyland with my boyfriend. We had kept that off social media. The whole relationship was a secret at the time, but that's a different story. The fact that Jerry blew up my phone was also really unsettling. He had said never to contact him again, so I thought that would be the end of it. But then I started seeing him everywhere. One day, I was sitting at the public library studying. Of all the empty seats, Jerry came in and sat across from me. He pretended to read, but I could feel him observing me closely. Another time I walked out of a manicure appointment, and he was standing right outside. I was already having really high levels of stress about getting arrested. I kept hearing stories about other local dealers getting arrested, and it had reached the point that every time I left my house, I wondered if it would be my last time. Jerry's behavior made my stress even worse. Now, I was also afraid for my physical safety. All that stress together was too much for me to handle. Even after years of therapy, that still weighs on me to this day. One day, Jerry approached me while I was about to enter a grocery store. He asked if I wanted to hear a poem he wrote. I said no thank you, left my cart there, and immediately ran to my car. Later that day, I asked my boyfriend for help, and my boyfriend said he would take care of the situation. He brought some friends with him and they confronted Jerry. As far as I know, they didn't hurt Jerry, but they intimidated him enough to make him leave me alone. By that point, I knew I needed to leave that business. It really wasn't difficult to stop selling. I just told everyone I wasn't going to do it anymore. My customers had built a bond with me by that point, so some of them were a little disappointed. But I was by no means the only dealer in the area. I'm sure they found someone else to buy from. I hope they didn't actually, but they probably did. I have no idea what happened to Jerry after that. The silver lining in all of this is that Jerry really made me think about my safety. Now, I avoid situations where I can't access help. I was almost kidnapped when I was 10. Heya. I've never actually posted this story anywhere and haven't told it to many folks. This really rattled me as a kid. I was about 10 when this happened. I'm 27 now, but I still have nightmares about this horrors. When I was little, every few years my family would go back to my mom's hometown, and we'd camp there for about a week or so during the summer when I was on summer break. And this place, Edgewood, is a pretty small town. It has a population of 200 to 250 people, give or take, last time I checked anyway, and was in a very rural part of the province, surrounded by forests and rather out of the way with a close-knit community of people who all knew each other. My mom, stepdad, and my 3-year-old sister stayed at our family friend's house to visit, but as soon as I sat down, my mom told me to take the dog for a walk and gave me $5 to take with me to the convenience store along the way so that I could get an ice cream or a drink, which I was thrilled with, so off I went. The walk to the store was pretty uneventful. The town is incredibly small, and practically everything was within walking distance. The convenience store was about a 5-minute walk away, so I didn't have a hard time finding my way there. Once I bought my Pepsi, I went ahead and sat outside in front of the store in the shade, taking a moment to sip at my drink before heading back to the house. That's when a blue car pulled up. I wasn't in the area often, so I didn't recognize anybody I met beyond the few family friends my mom would take us to visit every time we were in town. The person in the car rolled down their window and looked over at me, offering a smile and a wave. She looked rather unkempt and appeared to be in what I could only assume was her mid-50s. She was 30, her hair was messy, and her car was covered in rusty spots, with cracked and damaged windows. I glanced up, offered a polite smile, and went back to my drink. It wasn't uncommon for people to be friendly in that community, so I didn't think anything of it for the most part. Then she called out to me, "Hey there, what's your name?" I looked up again, a bit hesitant to say anything, as I was a bit shy around new folks. Kayla, I answered, not saying much else. I did get taught about stranger danger, but given that this town was a very small, tight-knit community, it didn't cross my mind at the time. I assumed I was safe. "Well, Kayla, I've got this makeup here, and you can have it if you want. I think you'd look beautiful with this makeup. Do you want to come and try it on? I can help you put it on." That was what made the first siren go off in my head. I shook my head, telling her, "No, it's okay. I don't wear makeup." I was literally 10, and was pretty tomboyish. I never had an interest in makeup, and from a stranger even less so. I was getting uncomfortable and getting up to leave, as she was insistent on getting me to at least give it a try, but I kept saying no and proceeded to start walking away when she offered me something else. "Well, what about a muffin? I've got these muffins that are too good to keep to myself. I've got a bunch in the back if you want to come and take one." That was Siren 2. I knew 2 things about walking around by myself anywhere. 1, don't ever take food/candy from strangers. And 2, don't ever get into a van, a car, or a truck, any vehicle with someone I didn't know. I said no again and explained that my family was waiting for me. She looked annoyed at this point and insisted again. "Well, I can drive you back, but you just need to get in the car." She was snapping at me at this point, and I was reasonably rattled. I didn't say anything else and instead hurried off with my dog, hastily enough to where I forgot to even take my Pepsi with me. I don't know why, but something in my head told me not to lead the woman to the house my family was at. So instead, I walked off to the campsite, which was about another 5 minutes away. I figured she wouldn't have any reason to follow me to a campsite that likely had other people there, in case she wanted to try anything. But of course, here's where I was wrong. The campsite was particularly empty that day, and it's not really monitored by anybody. So this was probably the dumbest idea I could have had. I walked along the path that led to the road full of campsite lots, and sure enough, one glance behind me sent chills down my spine, and my stomach sank. The woman was following me in her car. She was a good 10 to 15 meters away, but was keeping space with me, like she was waiting for me to stop. I panicked, picked up my dog, and walked a bit faster down the road to see if I could get anybody's attention and ask for help. In my panic, I found one man who was setting up his campsite and ran to him as fast as I could. I desperately tried to explain what was happening. I was on the verge of tears, explaining that someone who tried to get me into their car was following me. He hummed and eventually said, "Sorry, I've got my dog with me. I can't leave her here for long. I hope you find your way back," and left me on my own. Tears streamed down my face as I begged him one more time, but it didn't change his answer. I looked behind me and noticed that the blue car was gone. I thought that maybe she gave up, or didn't want to be seen. But either way, I took this opportunity to sprint away again, desperately looking for someone that would let me sneak back to the house off of the main campsite road. Off the side of the road, there was a very thick array of bushes. I picked up my dog once again and ran off into the brush, until I was far away enough and hidden enough from the road. I held my dog tight and patiently waited to see if the car would drive by, watching through the bushes. A few minutes passed, and sure enough, there she was, driving by again slowly, almost like she was looking for something. Once she drove off, I wanted to make a break for it, but something told me to stay right where I was. Another few minutes passed by, and the car was back. She had looped around, driving agonizingly slow. And that wasn't the first time she looped around. She did this more times than I can even recall. I stopped counting at some point. At the final loop, I saw her park her car down the road, a good 40-ish meters behind where I was hiding, as she got out and started walking down the road. And again, like she was looking for something. I was practically petrified. I laid there for God knows how long, waiting as she walked down the road. Eventually, I heard her mumble something and swear at the end of the sentence before she walked back up to her car. She hit the hood of her car before getting back in and speeding off. I waited another half hour, give or take, before I finally plucked up the courage to grab my dog and run as fast as I could back to the house. By the time I had gotten there, my legs were shaking and I could barely stand. My lungs were on fire and I was on the verge of tears again. My mom came out and scolded me for taking so long, asking me why I was gone for as long as I was. I broke out in tears, explaining to her what exactly happened, and how I was followed and looked for at least an hour. She shrugged and explained that nobody here would do anything like that, and went back inside. Our family friend James pulled me aside and asked me to describe the woman and the car. He said, "We know a lot of people here in town. I might know who you're talking about." I told him everything I saw, and he hummed, glancing up while he pondered what he could recall about the people he knew in town. "Yeah, I don't know anyone with a car like that here in town. I'll ask around and see if anyone else knows who you're talking about." The rest of the evening was pretty uneventful, but I stayed inside and refused to leave the house. James eventually pulled my mom aside to talk to her again, but I didn't hear their conversation. The remainder of the trip was otherwise calm, but for the rest of our time in town, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without my mom or my stepdad, and anytime I had to take the dog for a walk, one of them always came with me. I don't think I was ever alone again during that trip, excluding when I needed to use the washroom. Whatever James told my mom, I wanted to say that it got her to take me seriously. I don't think anybody knew who that woman was, but honestly, I'd rather not find out.